welcome to the Animal Training Academy Making Ripples podcast show, the show where we share the stories of the ripple-making extraordinaires with behavior nerd superpowers who make up the Animal Training Academy membership. I'm your host and one of the happiness engineers at Animal Training Academy, Shelly Wood from Drop Your Jaws Dog Training in Cape Girardeau, Missouri in the United States. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. Make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that you don't miss a single episode. This show is brought to you on behalf of the Animal Training Academy membership. So if you like the conversations in these episodes, then we want to invite you to continue them with like-minded people in the ATA membership, which you can find out more about at www.atamember.com. Within the membership, you can get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalog of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help you problem solve your training challenges. And we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forums area. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behavior geeks. Today's guest, Anna Gigliotti-Skret, a behavior-focused dog trainer based in Fremantle, Walyalup in Western Australia. Her work centers on compassionate, practical training that helps people and their animals live well together. Anna began her career working in orientation and mobility instruction for people who are blind or vision impaired, which eventually led her to train as a seeing eye dog instructor. Since moving into independent work, she has continued expanding her knowledge through study with the Karen Pryor Academy, Michael Shikashio's Aggression in Dogs Master Course, and Susan Friedman's Living and Learning with Animals, along with conferences, courses, and plenty of reading. As well as being a member of ATA, she is also part of the Lima Beings community, a group that meets online regularly to explore compassionate conversations about behavior and how we relate to animals, each other, and ourselves. Anna shares her life with one of her former pet training dogs, whose complex behavioral needs have been both a challenge and a joy, and her work focuses on helping people and their animals find practical, compassionate ways to live well together. Welcome, Anna. I'm so excited to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much, Shelley. Thanks for having me.
And you're coming to me from the future. It's a day ahead, and what time is? Or actually, are we on the same day right now?
Yeah, we're on the same day. It's 8 p.m. or 20 past 8 in the evening on Monday. Yeah. And I think you're in the Monday morning.
Yep, that's right. It's about 7:30 Monday morning, or almost 7:30 Monday morning here. So we've got quite the time difference between us. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and so late in your day to join us too.
Yeah. Well, thank you for functioning so early in the morning. I find it much easier to function in the evening than in the morning. So this is a better setup. Yeah.
I think functioning might be a bit of a stretch. There we go. Yes, a bit of a stretch.
Yes.
This morning.
Perfect Freudian slip.
Well, I'm going to let you do a lot of the talking, I think, Anna. Could you start us off today by sharing a little bit of your story with us, how you started working with animals, maybe some of how you got into working with guide dogs, and what you're spending your days doing today with animals?
Yeah, sure. So, I guess my story was quite, things just fell into place without a real plan, which I think that's exactly how I function. So, as a kid, I was animal mad. I would have different animal books. My imaginary friends were all animals. I was never interested in playing like a nurse or a teacher or mums and dads kind of childhood games. I always wanted to be a dog or a cat or a lion or something. So and I still dream about baby animals as I used to as a child. And then as I started growing up, as a teenager, I thought, oh, that's a bit daggy. It's a bit uncool to be totally into animals. So, you know, I tried to think about some other things that I might do. And at university, I considered doing teaching or psychology or some sort of social work or disability studies. And I did a bunch of subjects in an arts degree and a lot of different kind of sociology and social work and different subjects in there. And one of the subjects was on vision and hearing impairment. And through that subject, they talked about a postgraduate diploma in orientation and mobility, which is working with blind people. And I thought, this could be a kind of career path as an option. And I was encouraged in that class that, you know, I had good creative thinking in how to modify things for somebody who is vision impaired or blind. And so really didn't quite know what I was going into, but I ended up having a gap year traveling to Europe and really enjoying that. Came home, Mum encouraged me to go to the university course, and so I studied as an orientation mobility instructor. And that is teaching blind people how to get around safely. So it's a lot of working with the long cane and, you know, learning sort of to use your residual vision, residual hearing, and getting around safely when you can't see. And little did I know that that was a really clear pathway towards becoming a guide dog instructor. And so a few years into that, working in that field, I got the opportunity as being a seeing eye dog instructor. That was another 3.5-year cadetship. And in that time, you know, you're doing a traineeship, you're training groups of dogs and working out which ones are going to be suitable for that role and you know, what kind of training you can do to improve the dog, you know, the dog's behaviours and their skills, how they can work with the person, or whether they're not going to be suitable due to, you know, multiple reasons. And then, you know, interviewing the clients and working out which dog is going to be suitable for which person and training them together. So that was amazing. You know, when I found out that there was a job that you could work in where it pairs people with disability and working with animals, I thought, gee, that is absolutely fun and, you know, such a good kind of career move, or, yeah, just something that I really love doing. And certainly it's so exciting. You're always walking with, you know, every animal is different and then every person is different. And so, you know, really working in this space, which is quite dynamic and quite interesting every time, I just never really get bored of that. And so from there, I worked in that for quite a while. It's a complicated space to work in, you know, and I think in the force-free space, there's a lot of ethical dilemmas in that, which I think there's a lot of ethical dilemmas in all of any kind of animal-related field. So whether it's, you know, any kind of animal in captivity, whether it's a pet dog or whether it's in a zoo or even in nature that's impacted on by so many kind of, impacts of humanity and, all the complications that we have. So after working in that area for quite a while, I then started working independently and branched out into pet dog training as well. So then branching out in pet dog training, I was able to do, you know, additional studies and really upskill my knowledge, and had opportunities to work not only with individuals in their homes, but also with a behaviour vet and their team of trainers. So that was really interesting as well, getting that insight and that lens of, I guess, doing triage for medical issues and how the kind of medical and health side impacts or interrelates with the, you know, with the training side of things, and also, of course, the management and environmental setup.
You covered a lot of ground there. Um,
I know there's a lot to cover.
yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I love how your story, I love the evolution of your story and how, you were this animal crazed kid who couldn't imagine doing anything besides working or being an animal, working with or being an animal. And then when you went to university, you went on a different path, and that path led you right back to where you always wanted to go. That's really, really a cool story. I love it. Um, I'm super curious. This is something when you started talking about the orientation and mobility work that you did, and you were talking about, teaching people to use the cane, teaching people to get around safely. It made me wonder if it seems to me like there would be quite a bit of overlap with maybe some of the teaching skills that you used with those people and teaching skill that you also used then with the dogs. I mean, obviously, you were teaching them completely different things, and with people, you're able to talk and communicate in that way. But I would think that maybe it involves some of the same skills as far as breaking things down into smaller components and building from there. Is that right? Do you see some overlap between those two roles?
Yeah, I think I do. I guess, I mean, certainly when, every dog that you work with can then inform, but in terms of if you're talking about seeing eye dog or guide dog training, the more you train clients, the more you realize what the dogs could benefit from learning. And then the more you train the dogs, you realize how it kind of comes back to what's useful for the person or how that's going to work with the person. And certainly, I mean, it was such a difference when I started doing training working with sighted people, and I realized that I didn't have to explain everything in words. It didn't have to be broken down quite as much. When you're working with a sighted person, you could say, here, I'll just take the lead and I'll show you, or take a video, where you can't necessarily do that with somebody who's totally blind. So I certainly noticed that my ability to articulate what I'm doing absolutely informs working with my pet dog clients to be able to explain myself. But is that making sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, and I guess, the more I learn about learning, I mean, it's still, learning works whatever species you are. And so when you think about, well, I walk into this person's house and I want to change everything, and you think, well, you can't actually just change everything straight away. You still need to start with that kind of shaping step ladder. And so, where are they at? Where are they at now? What do they need to learn? What's the end goal? And what can they do today? And then how can I shift it just a little bit? And then how can I add a little bit more? And I think I'm still, we're always learning, if we're attentive, we're always learning, and always willing to shift what we're doing. And so I guess I'm still, those skills of being able to kind of pause and say to somebody, oh, how does this sit with you? Like, rather than just throw information at somebody and say, does that make sense? And is that working for you? Or is this the right method of doing things? So being able to really slow things down. But yeah, it's tricky. It's always, whenever you're working with a different person and a different animal, you've always got to be able to kind of meet them where they're at and then adapt and see. Even if you've got the same goal in your head for every person, they're not all going to get to that same place in the same way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. That is really interesting to think of. And it sounds like you've had a lot of opportunities in your life to work with diverse people and dogs, and to implement your skill set and refine your skill set. Depending on the populations, or based on the feedback you're receiving from the populations and the individuals who you're working with. So really, really cool. Thank you for sharing all of that. And I want to also circle back to something else that you talked about in your introduction, because you just mentioned it briefly and just went right on. But I believe you said you had a degree in the arts. Is that right?
It's a Bachelor of Arts, which means that it's like humanities subjects. So it's not arty art, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
So it's
Yeah.
not fine arts. Although I did study art in like year 12 at school, just because I thought it would be fun. I picked all of the most fun subjects, including specialist maths. I thought that would be really fun, the hardest math subject. It was not fun. Art was much more fun. So I'm not sure why I thought that would be fun, because it's not. And I think I've forgotten all the math stuff that I ever learnt. But yeah, I think, yeah, the main theme of probably my life is that I pick things that I'm going to enjoy in the moment. I'm less able to look for some kind of long-term goal. It's really, it's just very fortunate that I've ended up doing things that I enjoy that ends up being a long-term job or experience.
And speaking of doing things that you enjoy that end up being a long-term job or experience, right now for work, you're primarily doing companion dog training, or what are you doing these days?
Yeah, so my work, I'm working independently, and my business name is Forward Thinking Dog Training and Mobility. And that encompasses working independently as a freelance orientation mobility instructor, as well as freelance guide dog instructor, as well as companion dog or pet dog training with people in their homes. So I guess the primary focus of my work is going to people's homes and working with them with their goals, whether it be, I guess it's mostly one-on-one or occasionally, with the family, but not really group training. But, whether it be working with someone with their long cane or with their guide dog, it might be learning routes that they need to work on, so getting from home to work or accessing a train station, those kind of tasks. Or it might be, puppy training or rescue dog training, whatever kind of dog situation somebody's got, and working with them in their home. So, yeah, it's a bit of a range.
That's wonderful. And it seems like it could be really fun to work with a variety of things like that. Do you enjoy that, not doing the same thing every day and working a little bit differently?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, I love that. And I love being able to go into people's homes and kind of get a snapshot of their life, and just seeing, well, what works for this person, or, what does their day look like with their dog, or if they're a cane user, then, what does their day look like for them? What kind of activities and tasks do they get up to? So I really like that stuff.
And so you said you're doing like companion dog training in the home. You're doing some work with people and their mobility and orientation needs. And then you are also doing some guide dog training still. Is that right?
Yes. So sometimes I do contract work with a guide dog organisation. So that can vary whether I'm coaching younger staff who are training, teaching them how to train their dogs, or whether I do some work with their clients, checking in on their home visits, or, making sure that everything's going well with their dogs. Or it can be some like dog training and assessment directly with them. Or alternatively, in Australia, we have the NDIS at the moment, which is the National Disability Insurance Scheme. So it's basically a funding agent that allows people to choose who they can get their support through. So if they need some disability support with their current guide dog or seeing eye dog, or if they need some support with their long cane training, then they can, I guess, hire me through their funding. and work with me directly. So, engage me directly rather than them going through a major organisation, which is the other options.
All right. Thank you for sharing that as well. And I also wonder if and she may come up again later as we dive into some more specific training examples. I'm not sure, but I wonder if you would like to take a moment to introduce your dog to us and tell us a little bit about how she came to you.
Yes. So I have Maggie, and she's currently passed out on the floor, which is great. I wasn't sure whether she'd be yapping and, woofing. Yapping makes her sound tiny, but she's a King Charles Cavalier cross poodle. So in Australia we say cavoodle, but I think you guys might say, do you guys say cavapoo for that? But yeah. So, and so, yeah, I know that a lot of trainers and people go, oh, God, these doodles. And she was one of my training dogs. So I was meant to be getting paid to train her. And then I ended up adopting her. So she needed, she was 7 months old. She needed to be rehomed because it wasn't the right situation for her. A lovely guardian who was really trying to do all the best things for her, but really found out that she wasn't able to manage a dog in things that were going on in her life. But when she wanted to rehome Maggie, after we'd been doing about 2 months of training together, Maggie wasn't really improving in her behaviours, and I flagged that I was concerned there was a behaviour issue. And she was assessed by a behaviour vet in Adelaide, who diagnosed her with hypersensitivity, hyperactivity, which is I liken it to ADHD. So it's like a doggy ADHD. So she would tail chase, she would jump on you, she would mouth, she could not self-settle, she could get very frustrated. Her frustration could turn into biting you because she just couldn't settle herself. And she could get into altercations at the dog park as well with that. So her future was looking pretty grim, and in terms of rehoming a dog that had significant medication needs and management needs, the decision was made that she would be put to sleep. And then our lovely friend Emma Cook, who has been interviewed on the Making Ripples podcast back in 2024, I just mentioned to her, this lovely dog I've been working with, she's super sweet, but she'll be put to sleep tomorrow. And Emma said, oh, God, we can't do that. Let's see if my 2 Kelpies accept her. And so I, voluntarily kind of went out with the other guardian, Maggie's guardian, and we went and met Emma and her dogs. And, Emma's dogs did not want anything to do with Maggie. They were just really not interested in having this, 7-month-old crazy little oodle, in their space. And the more I looked at how sweet Maggie was, she was really sweet with other dogs. And, when she was, when her arousal was low and when she wasn't kind of spiraling upwards, she was, great with people, loves children, and, really quite meek and mild when when Emma's dogs were telling her to bugger off. So I convinced my partner at the time that maybe we'll just take her, just to see what she's like for a few days or a couple of months. We'll see how she responds to medication and that kind of thing. And I was very lucky to be also working with the behaviour vet who had diagnosed her. So I had good access to trying the medication and really being able to give that feedback when things weren't working. It was a terrible, that whole medication experience is really tough. So I'm very pro medication for what it can do, but it does feel really scary, as a guardian. You're kind of worrying the whole time. Am I just drugging this animal? And, is she happy with this? Is she not? How do I determine what she's comfortable with? Does it change her personality? We don't want something that's just going to be like a floor rug and that's just zonked out. So how do we retain her personality, retain her quality of life, but help her to live in this complicated world that we live in? So it was a bit of a journey, but we finally found the right medications that work well for her. I'm on another bit of a journey at the moment with her because she's had ongoing, stomach upsets and ear infections and fussiness with eating food. So I'm currently doing a strict food trial with her at the moment, and we're only 3 weeks in. She's the fussiest dog in the universe. I haven't tested. I don't have the data to prove that, but I can take my treat pouch and hand her the kibble that she doesn't like at the moment, her medicated, whatever, allergenic food. I can hand that to her at the start of the walk and she'll eat it, and 15 minutes later I'll hand her a piece and she'll spit it out or she'll sniff it and turn her head. So, she's very, very selective. I would love to try the kind of raw food side of things, and she absolutely, tips her nose at that and says no way. So I once bought some pasture-raised chicken hearts, and I popped them into her bowl thinking, she's going to be like, isn't she the luckiest dog in the world to have these expensive farmers markets hearts? And plucked each one out of her bowl and then dropped it next to the bowl on the floor. She was like, I'm not touching that crap. I don't know what you've put in there. I'm not going to have that. So she's an absolute anomaly. And so, we just have to get through this kind of couple of months of food trial and just see, which foods are there specific foods that are triggering her? Are they not? And then we can, hopefully have some more interesting stuff in her meals.
Well, thank you for sharing a little bit about your Maggie with us. I always love seeing updates of things you're working on with her in Animal Training Academy. I can think of a couple husbandry related updates that I've seen of yours that I really enjoyed in the group before. And I hope you get some good data from the food trials that you're doing right now and are able to make the adjustments you need to help her be an even happier dog than she already is with you. Could you share with us now about a training-related challenge that you've experienced, how you worked through it, and maybe some of the things you learned from the process?
Yeah, so it's interesting about training-related challenges. I always feel like every single new dog that I work with is a training-related challenge, even if it's the same. Even if it's loose leash walking with every single dog, I feel like each dog responds so differently, and each person has different ways that they can, different expectations or different physical limitations that the person might have, or so I find some of that really interesting. For example, one person with loose leash walking, he said, my little dog is not walking perfectly beside me. And I said, does she need to walk perfectly beside you? If she's ahead or as long as she's not tripping you over and spinning around or lunging or, what happens if she just walks a bit ahead? And he was just so happy that I gave him permission that, the group training that he did, they work on heel and they heel by your left. And as soon as I said, oh, she can go in front or she can stop and sniff, that was almost all we needed to do. So it was almost not really a dog training thing. It was just managing expectations. And whereas other people, it is really, essential because they've got a dog that's dragging them around, that's zigzagging, that's curling the lead around the human, or the person doesn't have the strength. So it can really vary. Today I was working with a 7-month-old Cairn Terrier, and we were going to look at her recall, and so at home I said, well, let's pick the favourite food, let's do a little food preference test. And so we scattered a number of different, types of food down, and I thought, oh, for sure she'll pick out the freshly cooked beef mince first. And she just ate everything random, she just kind of systematically just ate through from whatever's nearest to her to what was further away. And most dogs I've seen lately, have just picked out like the yummy wet treats first. And yeah, she just went, oh yeah, cheese, dry food, meat, whatever. Just went through it. And I was like, great, everything's high value. There was no hesitation. And so we take her to the tiny little park near their house, and she completely ignored us through the whole, as soon as she had her nose in the grass, even when she did come back and we handed her a piece of meat and fresh mince, she just ignored it. She let it fall to the ground. She was far more happy to sniff. And so, while today's session was supposed to be about recall, it ended up being working on a sniffari. So I said, look, this is, she's telling us, she's voting with her nose, and she's saying this is what's really, really important for her. So how about we let that need get met, and then we see what happens after the sniffari. And so we'll see how we go next session once she gets a bit more of that under her belt. So I guess, yeah, I find that most of the training challenges, it's almost like having an idea in your head and then being absolutely ready to pivot as soon as you see that, the dog or the weather or the environment, is not on board with what you had in mind. And then, I guess in terms of challenges as well, just thinking about, I've found also some of the biggest challenges is when you're working with bigger organisations. And so, it's working, like, how do we work well in a system that might not be having the same goals that we have as an individual. So, I've had, a lot of management or a lot of seniors who have had a lot of different ideas around training, and encouraging a lot more punishment and correction based training, and criticising that, the use of food in training. It's certainly changing and it's evolving, but it can, sometimes it's a couple of steps forward and a few steps back as well. And so I guess, managing your, the big challenge is like managing your own burnout in those kind of spaces, and your own ability to kind of work out, well, how can I affect change in something that I can see, that I feel and others, and many people might feel needs changing, but the system isn't ready for it in that time. So, how can we affect that change that we can see, that we feel is really beneficial? And it's tricky. Yeah, it's a really tricky one. So, certainly I've sort of had to work out, well, which battles can I pick and which ones can't I? How much autonomy do I have? How much do you need to toe the line? And you don't, I always feel like I end up being that person who's speaking up for things and saying things that aren't right, and then I start getting worried. Well, now I'm just kind of, oh God, there's Anna again, picking on things and kind of getting a black mark against your name. So it can be a really kind of difficult space at times. And I mean, I guess in the end, I moved away from that and thought, well, maybe I can do this independently. And if that is I guess if the clients start coming to me, if people with their guide dogs or seeing eye dogs start coming to me for support, instead of their organisations that have provided the dog, then hopefully that can give those organisations some pause for thought, and so that they could improve things and change things. For example, if I'm offering cooperative care and if they're not doing that in their school, then maybe they'll be adopting that more likely to adopt that. But in saying that, they're not all. There's a lot of cooperative care stuff that is happening more and more in the organisations. So I do see that change happening, and it's really, that's really exciting to see that.
Thank you for sharing all of that as well. And I love the way that you talked about how like every situation we go into as trainers is basically a training challenge, and needing to be able to identify what those goals really are. Sometimes what we hear the goals are a little bit different than what they might really be. And then also what you were just talking about right now, as far as the what's sounds to me a mismatch sometimes of goals that a system might have. And I think that can be true, certainly true in organizations. And I think it can also be true in working with families, right? Sometimes I think there might be a mismatch there too. I see you nodding your head. Do you sometimes experience that working with pet dog people as well? That you might be wanting to affect change in a way that might not exactly be what their current goal is?
Oh, I always feel like it's that, one person in a relationship might hire me and they say, well, my other half is not on board, so you need to tell them this is how we do it, and I find that that's really tricky. Or my kids aren't on board, or whatever it is, and that's the part where I kind of go, well, I don't know whether I'm a good family mediator as such. So yeah, it's one of those. I mean, the family dynamics can be really complicated, as of course can a workplace. The more moving parts there are, then the more complex it can be. And I guess you just have to try not to shame anyone when you're working with them, and value their perspective, and try to work out, well, do we have some shared goals here? What will work together, and how can we make this work for everyone, not just the one person in the family who wants, something from the dog versus, the rest of the family, or vice versa.
Yeah, I love what you said too about, do we have some shared goals here? Because that's what I was thinking when you were talking, is that sometimes too, maybe it boils down to, and I don't know, I'm just thinking off the top of my early morning head here. So this might not make sense, but I'm thinking that sometimes it boils down to whether we're working with an organization or a family system, that maybe we just need to dig a little bit deeper on identifying what those goals are and what the motivation behind the goals are, because sometimes there could be more common ground between the change that we're hoping to affect and the change that the family or the system needs. Because if someone's coming to us for help with their dog, whether it's within an organizational system or a family, there is a need there. They need some help. And so I guess it's our job to try to find where that common ground is. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, could you share with us now, Anna, about a training situation that you're proud of and or have found reinforcing?
Yeah, so one in the guide dog space, I can say. I've got a couple of ideas for this. So one in one guide dog organisation, we would let the dogs out of their kennel in the morning, and four of them would have a toileting yard to do their morning toileting. And one dog, Petro, he loved to eat other dogs' poo, and so our main sort of practice at that place would be to try to beat him to it. So it was kind of a race to the poop, and there might be some yelling and scrambling, and so he would just try to get there faster. And if you're a hungry Labrador, you can be pretty fast. So it was pretty chaotic, and so I thought, right, I am going to be Pedro's not poop dispenser, Pez dispenser. So while the other dogs were pooping, I would be right next to Pedro and just handing him kibble after kibble as part of his breakfast. And he quickly realized that he got better food from me than from the other dogs. And so he would follow me around in the mornings, and I would just feed him while the other dogs were able to go to the toilet and we could clean up after them. And so that worked really well. But the really cool thing was that one day I had him on leash and we were out doing a training walk. So we were away from the kennel environment, and another colleague had one of her dogs on lead going to the toilet. And as soon as her dog started to squat, Pedro just looked straight at me and straight at my treat pouch, as if to say, hey, this is the scenario where I get fed. And I was like, wow, that is so magical when that kind of training just generalizes itself in such a way. I hadn't done it so that it would be effective in any other environment. I wasn't deliberately trying to generalize that behavior. It was something that I thought was specific to the kennel environment at a specific time. But Pedro obviously realised that no, this has value. If another dog is pooping, I deserve to get fed. So that was really cute. I really liked that one. And then, yeah, sorry, did you want to say something, Shelley?
I was just going to say I love that one too. And it sounds like Pedro generalized your behavior because I assume you fed him,
Sure
right?
did. Oh, of course. Yeah, I was like, you're amazing, Pedro. He deserved that for sure. Definitely. And another interesting transfer of behaviour that happened was with Maggie. So again, I think it was just from Kathy Sadeo talks about like how to put things on cue and watching for a behaviour and predicting when a behaviour is going to happen. And if you know that a behaviour is going to happen, regardless of whether you have any influence or not, you can just chuck the cue in front of it, and that cue becomes attached to the behaviour. So of course, if it happens, consistently enough and predictably enough. So before Maggie, when Maggie was sort of 7 or 8 months old, and I just had her, and she would be off leash at the dog park, and she would see a dog at a fair distance, and I would think there is no chance that she is going to stay with me. She's absolutely going to look at that dog for a few seconds and then run over and greet them. And so when she stopped and stared at them for a few seconds, I would just say, go say hi. So as if I had any control over it, she was going anyway. So we added this go say hi cue when she was looking at another dog and thinking about running over to them. And then I realised later that I was able to transfer that and use that cue when she was looking at me and she's close to me, but I can see another dog running towards her. And I knew that another dog running towards her, if they snuck up on her, she might react and get upset with them because she's been given a fright. And so as this other dog is, running towards her, I just say to her, go say hi. And then she's able to look, see a dog from a safer distance. And then she was able to greet them and not react and not explode and not get upset about being snuck up on. So that was a really cool one too.
That is really cool. I love that. What a creative way for you to think about using that go say hi cue too.
Yeah, yeah. And it was just kind of by accident. It just, just because that was a cue that she knew, I was able to then just throw it in place and that, caused her to turn around and realize there was a dog there. So, so that was a really cool one that worked well in that transfer space. And then I've got one more, one more happy. I've probably got lots of bits and pieces. But
keep them coming. We love it.
Yeah, great. But certainly, when Maggie had all of her ear infections and having to medicate her, and as soon as I would go into the kitchen where her meds were, she would start generalizing that, well, that's where the medicine is. Anytime Anna goes into the kitchen, I might get my ear medicine and I don't like this, so she would run away. And so it meant that every time I walked through the house, I'm walking through the kitchen, so many, many times a day, she would be running out of the room and looking back to check, is the nasty twice a day ear medication happening now? And it was through, I think it's Kiki Ablon and also Mary Hunter have done some really cool stuff around changing the environment to change a behaviour. And so, through kind of learning some of their webinars, I then introduced a real a really clear routine for Maggie, which I call the medicine hat routine. And so I would put a hat on to show her that something has changed, and this particular hat only stays in her medicine tub, so it's not a hat that I wear any other time except for medicating. And so I would get the medicine hat and pop it on, and then I would clearly say to her, I'm sorry, Maggie. So I would give her a verbal cue as well so that she knew, just to add another context cue to that. Then I would go and draw up the medication, and I would put the medication into her ears, and then I would take the hat off and I would say, it's all finished. And then we go and run to the fridge, and in the fridge I would have some pre-prepared cooked chicken, which obviously I can't do at the moment. Have her favourite, some roast chicken, and she'd get heapings of that afterwards. And so making sure that she wasn't smelling the chicken beforehand, that it, came purely after the nasty thing, and it wasn't an expectation of training or anything cooperative. It was just a message that, okay, this nasty thing is happening right now. Sorry, we can't do anything about it, but you just need to we got to get it done. But you will get some good chicken at the end. And through doing that a few times, it absolutely changed her approach. She stopped generalizing and panicking throughout the day. So she wasn't running out of the room. She wasn't watching, with wariness in her eyes as to, oh God, is the nasty thing happening? And she also started to wag her tail when the process was happening. So either partway through, she actually did not leave. Sometimes she would stand in place rather than me having to catch her. Not all the time, but sometimes she would. And as soon as that hat comes off, every single time, she does a full body shake and then wags her tail and happily trots behind me to get her treats. And I mean, this is a dog who doesn't even wag her tail when dinner or breakfast comes out. You know, she's a very serious looking dog at those times. But at the end of the relief, I think, I mean, I'm just adding that into her, you know, I'm superimposing my emotions or, you know, my thoughts. But honestly, to me, it looks like she's relieved that it's over and she's excited and anticipating this good food. So, yeah, it's really cool to see that. It really helped a lot.
It is really cool to see it. And thank you for sharing it now. And thank you for sharing video of it in the Animal Training Academy community earlier when I mentioned some things that you had shared about your work with Maggie in the community before and some husbandry related things. This is one of the things that I was thinking about. And I actually, you met my cat Wednesday earlier. She's had some health issues recently, and she's had to take some icky medication. And some of the things that you did with Sweet Maggie influenced the process that I ended up using to try to create some clarity around when that icky thing was going to be happening, when it was going to be over, and also providing something really fantastic as soon as it was over. So thank you for spreading some ripples that helped me in my Sweet Wednesday.
Fantastic. And are you happy to share your experience there, what you're doing with Wednesday?
Sure. I only used a verbal, and I would come upstairs when I had the medicine. Well, the first couple times I tried to give her the medicine, or the first couple times I had to give her the icky tasting medicine, I noticed very quickly she was showing a lot of avoidance behavior to me a lot of the time. And so I thought I've got to clear this up and make things a lot more predictable for her, because I felt like our relationship was starting to take a hit. And so I just introduced a clear cue when I was walking upstairs. I would say, bad news Wednesday. And I would say it in the exact same voice every time. And if I was walking upstairs for any other reason, I would be like, Wednesday, kitty, kitty, or something ridiculous like that, like I always say to her. So I would try to differentiate which was, which with the verbal. And then I would give her the medicine, and I had to give her the medicine twice a day. Typically, I would feed her a canned food twice a day. So I just kept closed cans of food up in the upstairs where I give her the medicine and a spoon, so that just immediately after giving her the medicine, I was able to pop open the can and dump it in her bowl for her. And there were some times when I would be coming upstairs and saying bad news that she would hop up on the desk, which is where I would give her the medicine. She didn't do it every time, but she did do it sometimes. And every time after I gave her the medicine, she did immediately reorient to the food bowl, even before I had popped the can open, like, give me the food. And I expect that, and I don't know if this was the case with Maggie maybe as well, but part of what I'm thinking with Wednesday too is that the medicine left an ick taste in her mouth. And so in addition to being food that she liked and enjoyed, it helped to get some of that ick taste out of her mouth probably. But yeah, so thank you for that.
I love that. Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I love it. Oh, I love that she was jumping up on the bench sometimes as well. Yeah, that's great. When you see that behaviour happening that, that we're not necessarily asking for, but then we're seeing that, they're anticipating, well, hey, this is where the food comes, So they're thinking through the whole process, and that they've learned, all right, this is how that sequence goes.
Yeah, I loved that too, and always really got a bit of joy from seeing that. And then the other thing I really love, and I expect that I'm guessing this will probably resonate with you too, with your experience with Maggie. But the other thing that I really loved was I saw that avoidance behavior completely go away in all other contexts. She wasn't, running and hiding from me at other times. And I actually only saw in the whole time I was giving her the medicine, which was probably over a month. She has to have it every once in a while now, but not as regularly. But anyway, in that over a month time period, I think when I was coming up with her bad news cue, I think I only saw her trying to escape that maybe twice during that whole time. Otherwise, she was kind of staying put. So was your experience with Maggie similar in that she became less worried about when you less worried, less avoidant, I guess, when you would be going in the kitchen, and less avoidant of the medicine in general.
Yes, yeah. So I definitely saw that, and I was really surprised to see the less avoidant of the medicine application, because I just did not expect that to happen at all. But for some reason it did. But then, months later when she got another ear infection, it kind of went back to, where I'm sort of having to kind of chase her down a little bit, or yeah, so which of course is never nice. But just to see that when, the generalization of having to worry was not there anymore. So that was fantastic. And yeah, when it was happening, for weeks on end, when I was doing her ears, then she wasn't doing the avoidance behavior when the medicine appeared, which, yeah, absolutely shocked me.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate you sharing about that now here on the podcast today and also in the community. I think that there is some really beautiful work that can be done with cooperative care, and we can do a lot of things to teach our animals to voluntarily and happily participate in care. And also, I think that sometimes things need to be done when our animals are not prepared for them. And we've got to find processes to do that, that maintain the relationship that we have with them, that maintain the trust accounts that we have with them and the relationships that we have with them. And sometimes those processes might not be, they might not look perfect, or the way that we have in our mind would look perfect for a cooperative care session. And so I really appreciate you sharing about how you approached this when something just had to happen. So thank you for that.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Because I also do her grooming because I'm just not sure about, if the groomer's here, because I've moved. So, previously had Emma Cook, our lovely fear-free groomer, who was the groomer for Maggie, and I was able to stay there the whole time and feed Maggie, and I would wash Maggie beforehand so that we could just focus on the grooming. And she really doesn't enjoy being groomed, doesn't like her haircut. And so when I moved interstate to Western Australia, then I decided to, financially and for Maggie's sake, I do her grooming now. So it means that we end up doing the groom over about a week. And so, there's only a certain amount. And of course, because I'm not a qualified groomer. And so, I don't have the hours and hours of skills that a really good groomer does have. I do a very functional groom, but I only do part of her. And then I can see that Maggie's tolerance has an expiry or a time period. So when I see that her tolerance is reduced and she starts to say, nah, I'm over this, then we just stop. We go to the park. We go to the park purely for getting all the excess fur off in the park rather than in my house. And, so that's more for practical reasons. She probably enjoys that too. She definitely enjoys the park time. And so, it might be that day one of her groom, I do her body, her torso, which is the easy part. And then the next time I come back and do more on her legs and her undercarriage, and then I might trim around some of her face on another day, or I might do her back feet on another day. Slowly have to sneakily get her tail done, and she still screams when I do her chin. She gets upset that her chin hair gets cut, even though it's like a centimetre away from her skin. She screams like I'm torturing her. So, so I might only get like one snip of the chin and then, leave it for another day. And I think I even asked the Animal Training Academy how to help to be able to trim her muzzle, because, around the whisker beds and around her lips, she's very avoidant of that as well. And I did find a good tip from somebody who said to pinch the hair, not pinch her skin, but, just to hold the hair in between my fingers and then cut away, on the other side of my fingers, so that I guess my fingers in between is numbing the feeling of the hair being cut. And that certainly helped a lot. So that tip was really, really helpful for her, because she just gets quite upset about having to have her face trimmed. So she can tolerate a little bit, but then, and she'll stay up on the grooming platform, which is great. But she will then kind of, back her head away or shake her head a little bit. And I realise, or she might open her mouth and just do a gentle mouthing of me, which is like, Anna, you've tried for one more and this is not going to work. And so, sometimes I need to be told no a few times before I, my stupid human, come on, let's just get a little bit more cut. So, I still have that, goal in my brain. It's always a hard balance to the cooperative stuff is, absolutely love it. And, you also see yourself trying to push and then, but the fact that Maggie sits there and stays on the table and says, no, Mum, I said no. Didn't you hear me last time? I think it's still really nice relationship stuff, and they'll start listening sooner each time.
It can be really hard with the cooperative stuff that you mentioned, the goal. We have our goal in mind and it's like, just one more because I want to get to this. And I think that also, the laws of learning and reinforcement applies to us too. And if we've gotten like multiple yeses, then we've been reinforced for doing it. So when we get the no, sometimes it's hard, at least for me. Sometimes it's hard to listen.
Oh,
Yeah.
and it's so satisfying to see the hair getting trimmed off when like if one side, if it's lopsided, you think, oh no, there's just another bit of this little clump of hair is out of place or something. So I'm too busy thinking about that. But yeah, I've had good compliments from strangers saying that she's got a great groom, and I think, they obviously don't know what a good groom looks like, but it's really sweet of people to say that. And it's good that I can get that done for Maggie and not have her in trusted hands. And, I don't want to have her kind of put into a situation where she might have to get upset and freaked out and set backwards, because I know that she's a dog who, she remembers things very, very well, and it's very hard to undo something if she is upset about it.
Well, Anna, before we get ready to wrap things up here in just a few minutes, is there anything that I haven't asked you about yet that you would like to take the opportunity to share about now?
Well, you didn't ask me how my weekend was, and I did. So it's nothing to do with training. I went for my very first ever nighttime snorkeling session.
Oh, nice.
And it was just magical. And so I've just been on a real high after doing some night snorkels this weekend. So, you were going to ask something?
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was so good. So as I've told people, I said, I'm just going to go and meet some strangers from the internet at the beach at night and go for a night snorkel. And it was lovely. The strangers from the internet were really nice humans. And I said to them at the end, thank you for not, being creepy or murderers or anything like that. And so it was me and another guy and another woman. And the snorkel that we did on Saturday night, we saw octopus, we saw squid, cuttlefish, crayfish. We were able to switch our torches off and flick our fingers through the water so that you can see tiny little flecks of bioluminescence. which is just gorgeous. It was absolutely magical. And it was so good that we then said, what are you doing tomorrow night? And we did it again last night. And saw this amazing octopus, and we saw a blue swimmer crab. So they're, quite a large crab. And this crab scuttled along the sand underwater and found a pufferfish that must have been napping on the sandbed, and quickly killed it and started eating it while we were watching. So, we got this really cool, National Geographic kind of experience on the weekend. So I've just been buzzing about it. And so, sorry to hijack a conversation that should be about training, but this was all about observing the natural world and just having a really, really fun time. So very lucky to live where I live.
Yeah, well, I love you got to do that. Thank you for sharing about that amazing experience with us as well. Anna, if people would like to reach out, get in touch, work with you, any of that sort of thing, how can people find you? If people would like to snorkel with you at nighttime, how can they find you on the internet?
So if people want to snorkel with me at nighttime, they have to make their way to Western Australia, and so that could totally happen. And I've got Facebook and Instagram, Forward Thinking Dog Training, and I've got a website, Forward Thinking Dog Training, and for my blindness work in orientation and mobility, I've got forwardthinkingmobility.com.au. And the website, the dog training website is forwardthinkingdogtraining.com.au. But I'm sure you can put that in the notes.
Well, Anna, thank you so much for taking time at the end of your busy day to share with us just a little bit about your animal training related journey. From myself, from on behalf of our listeners, on behalf of the Animal Training Academy, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks so much, Shelly. It's been great.
We do, of course, appreciate all of you tuning in as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and are interested in carrying on the conversation about working with the animals in our lives in the most positive, most fun, and most choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.atamember.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behavior geeks. That's it for this episode, though. Thank you so much for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.